Week 2 is almost in the book, so I'm bringing you some early waiver wire targets as well as trade targets for Week 3 fantasy football. Quentin Johnston, I was not familiar with your game. This meme is the appropriation of this Quentin Johnston game for the Chargers, and Quentin Johnston put up 22 fantasy points in full PPR. Now, if you have been tuning into the channel at all, you know that I really haven't been high on Quentin Johnston, higher on Josh Palmer, higher on Ladd McConkey. If we look at the overall PFF snap grades, 48 snaps, 19 routes run, 6 total targets for our guy Quentin Johnston against the Carolina Panthers, and he ended up with that 5 receptions, 51 yards, and 2 total touchdowns. So if he doesn't get those touchdowns, we do feel a little bit less about this performance, but I think heading into, Week 3, we've had a lot of injuries that are decimating our rosters right now, especially in the wide receiver front. Quentin Johnston's 100% a guy that you need to be looking to add up on waivers. Johnston is currently rostered on 17% of sleeper rosters, so he's going to be the number 1 waiver wire ad this week. 100% go target some Quentin Johnston. We move to my next waiver wire ad for Week 3. It's going to be Braelon Allen for the New York Jets. And Braelon Allen put up 19 fantasy points in this Week 1 game. And the thing that I want to talk about with Braelon Allen is not only the fact that he's only 20% rostered on sleeper leagues, but that Braelon Allen, we really like the prospect profile coming out of the University of Wisconsin. He just got that 4th round draft capital to the Jets playing behind Breece Hall. And coming into the season, we were a little bit nervous about what this overall snap share was going to look like for Braelon Allen. But I mean, in this Week 2 game, 7 attempts, 33 yards, 4.7 yards per carry, and he got that 1 total touchdown, as well as had 4 total targets, 2 receptions. I'm not saying that Braelon Allen is going to be anything more than, of course, the RB2, but he did play in 20 total snaps. Breece Hall played in 41. So he's played in like 25 to 30% of the snaps. And if this offense is going to be relying heavily on the running back production, then 100% be going and getting some guy like Braelon Allen. We talk about a guy like Bucky Irving last week that you need to be stashing, that you need to have on the end of your roster. Braelon Allen looks like he's going to have a role on this offense. If for some reason something were to happen to Breece Hall, which I hope it doesn't, knock on wood, but there's been crazy amount of injuries, Braelon Allen is a guy that you want to target on the waiver wire. My third guy that you need to be targeting on the waiver wire is going to be Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry put up 18 fantasy points in Week 2, 12 targets, 8 receptions, 109 yards. Dude was the number 1 target for this Patriots level offense, and he's only rostered on 22% of sleeper leagues. We are getting let down all over the board on tight end. So if you have a guy that's pretty much tight end 7 to tight end 12, you're going to have to be taking a serious look at Hunter Henry, because we do need to start getting some production from our tight ends. These elite level tight end guys we'll be talking about a little bit later, but we haven't been seeing the performance that we need out of these guys. And so a guy like Hunter Henry makes me really excited to see what he's going to just be able to continue to do week after week. And if you take a look at these overall snap shares, you're just going to see that Hunter Henry is just an absolutely electric dude, and we need to be having more of him, especially with Jacoby Brissett. He loves his tight end. He loves Hunter Henry. Definitely have to be considering some Hunter Henry on the waiver wire. The next guy is going to be Jalen Nailor out of Minnesota. This is year 2 out of Michigan State. And the thing that we need to understand with Jalen, I know I probably said his name wrong, but Sam Darnold's absolutely cooking. And we had Jordan Addison out this week, and then we see Justin Jefferson go out. They're saying that it's like a thigh bruise contusion, where it's probably going to be something like a day-to-day. And there's a good chance that he plays in Week 3. But with Addison out, and now with Justin Jefferson out, and Sam Darnold looking like he's cooking, and the fact that Jalen's put up 9 fantasy points in Week 1 and then 14 fantasy points in Week 2, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 54 yards, 13.5 yards per target, 18 yards per catch, with, of course, 1 total touchdown the last 2 weeks. Absolutely electric for Jalen. So I'm definitely going to be targeting him, especially like in a slightly deeper league. Or if I have a guy like Jordan Addison or Justin Jefferson, I think Jalen's a perfect guy to be adding. Like I said, only rostered in 4% of sleeper leagues, so he's definitely available out there. And we talked about some of these other guys, like the Quentin Johnston's going to be a lot more popular, Braelon Allen's going to be a lot more popular pick, but I definitely think you need to consider Jalen Nailor heading into Week 3. And then I'm going to round it out with 2 more guys on the waiver wire. Number 1 is going to be Derek Carr. I think not a lot of people have Derek Carr as their QB, but after what we've been seeing the Saints cook up, absolutely crazy. Derek Carr, I thought he was going to be left for dust when we've been considering his overall fantasy football points and his overall career. But I mean, dude put up 27 fantasy points in Week 1 and then 24 fantasy points in Week 2, going up against the Dallas Cowboys at age 33. I mean, we're talking about Alvin Kamara in the backfield. We're talking about Chris Olave, Taysom Hill, Rashid Shaheed, and Derek Carr needs to be a guy that's 100% added. Like, I don't care what you're saying. Derek Carr needs to be added, and there's probably probably some high-end QB2s that you might be debating that I would just say drop for Derek Carr because this dude's on an absolute heater and we 100% want a piece of him. Now, talking about Rashid Shaheed, he is rostered in 56% of sleeper leagues, but that should be 100%. So I do want to bring up the fact that Rashid Shaheed, 16 fantasy points in week 1, 20 fantasy points in week 2, 100% be targeting some Rashid Shaheed. I just felt like he didn't necessarily fit like the waiver wire target because he's probably on a roster on a lot of leagues. But if you are in a league where, of course, you're not in the 56% and Rashid Shaheed's out there, 100%, that should be your number one waiver wire target heading into week 3. Now, I also threw in Sam Darnold as a guy that you need to be targeting off the waiver wire. Like we said, we gave you a tight end option with Hunter Henry. Wanted to get you some QB options because I think it's going to be super important. 17 fantasy points in week 1, 22 fantasy points in week 2. And let's just think, like, we saw Justin Jefferson go out of the game and my dude still balled out with backup level wide receivers. He looks good in this overall really great offense for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm loving what I'm seeing from Sam Darnold. It's like a late little bit career resurgence. He's QB 14 in overall player rankings. So like I said, he's only 20% rostered. So Sam Darnold and Derek Carr 100% need to be added to your rosters. And that's going to transition us to a little bit about those are players that you should be adding. But when we talk about trades, I love last week we brought in some trades, some guys that you need to be trying to buy low. We will be putting out a video later this week where I actually give you legit trades once we start to see what some trades start to go down on Monday and start to go on Tuesday. But when we're looking at Garrett Wilson, this is the number one buy that I currently have right now in fantasy football. And the reason that I am so bullish on Garrett Wilson is not the fact that I've had Garrett Wilson high. It's not the fact that you see the Garrett Wilson jersey behind me. It's the fact that when we look at Garrett Wilson with Aaron Rodgers, it hasn't been great. 12 fantasy points in week 1, 10 fantasy points in week 2. It's the fact that we just don't need to be panicking on Garrett Wilson because through 2 games, he has 100% route participation, 29% target share, 45% air yards. He has monster games incoming and we need to be buying. And when we're looking ahead, I know it's kind of getting pushed down your rest of season rankings. Like a lot of people are like, hey, like Garrett, like Malik Neighbors just had a huge day. I'd rather have Malik Neighbors than what I'm seeing out of Garrett Wilson. And I think that is definitely an argument to be had. You do need to be considering what can I get for a guy like Garrett Wilson. But when we're looking, you were drafting Garrett Wilson in the back end of the first, potentially the early part of the second. We've seen a lot of these guys get injured or they're underperforming like Garrett Wilson. I just think in week 2, like the expectations for Aaron Rodgers to not only come back from the Achilles, but he is older and just to really get back into playing football and to be able to see and get people involved. I think that's the part for Garrett Wilson that he's going to continue to have to do because in the Pat McAfee interview, Aaron Rodgers said last week that he needed to get Garrett Wilson more targets, went from 11 targets to 6 targets. So that didn't happen, but the fantasy football production per target actually increased. So that's the part for me that makes me excited for Garrett Wilson going forward. Listen, 12, 10 fantasy points, that's not winning you a week, but I definitely think whoever has Garrett Wilson, they drafted him, they're be their bona fide stud. They're not feeling like that. But if I have some Garrett Wilson and or trying to get Garrett Wilson, I still think he has middling wide receiver 1 upside, absolutely targeting some Garrett Wilson as a great buy low opportunity. Now, I wanted to bring up a few more guys that you could potentially be buying low. And I wanted to talk about the tight end landscape because all offseason we were telling you, hey, draft one of these elite level tight ends. Travis Kelce, Sam LaPorta, Dalton Kincaid, Trey McBride, and or Mark Andrews. And it just hasn't been happening for any of them. Let's start talking about Mark Andrews, who had quite the bounce back this week, where we were looking at Mark Andrews getting 9 total fantasy points instead of 3 fantasy points last week, where he had 5 targets, 4 receptions, 51 yards, and really out-snapped and out-targeted Isaiah Likely after last week. Isaiah Likely, like we said, he was the waiver wire dollar last week, didn't really pan out in week 2. I think the part for me that as we continue to get going past the month, it's been a month since that car accident. He's also recovering from that ankle surgery that he had last year. He is 29 years old. So and add on top, I think there's a lot more mouths to feed in this offense. I still think Mark Andrews, we're going to have to hold firm. It hasn't been the best through the first 2 weeks, but I think it could be a lot worse. Mark Andrews is a guy that I'm definitely targeting, continuing to target in trades because his price has gotten pretty cheap because like we said, if you drafted one of these elite level tight ends, it really hasn't happened to the level that we want. Because then you could even talk about a guy like a Dalton Kincaid. And Dalton Kincaid's another guy where you were drafting Mark Andrews in the 4th. You were typically having to draft Dalton Kincaid in the 4th to 5th as well. And Dalton Kincaid on Thursday Night Football only put up 7 fantasy points, 2 fantasy points in week 1. And we were talking about how we thought this offense was going to run through Dalton Kincaid. He was going to be the number 1 receiving option. And it seems like it's really just the James Cook show over the first 2 weeks. Now, in week 2, he only played in a 42% snap share. And that definitely can be a concern. But if we look at the overall snaps, Dalton Kincaid, 19 snaps, 15 routes run, 4 total targets. Now, Dawson Knox actually played in 24 total snaps. So it is a little bit of concern with that. Of course, I'm I'm intrigued to see how they continue to deploy Dalton Kincaid, because I do think Dalton Kincaid's talented. But I would say I'm more worried about Dalton Kincaid than I am Mark Andrews, because we did just see kind of a little bit of a resurgence for Mark Andrews. But I definitely think you need to be considering Dalton Kincaid going forward, because like we said, this tight end position, you want guys that are in talented offenses with talented quarterbacks, and that's 100% going to be Dalton Kincaid. We'll provide you some trades later on this week, but I definitely think you need to continue to talk and debate some Dalton Kincaid as a great buy target. Like I said, this is almost like a tight end episode talking about buys here on Sunday night, because the next guy we're going to be talking about, Sam LaPorta. Sam LaPorta, 8 fantasy points in week 1, 3 fantasy points in week 2. And this Detroit level offense, I mean, you saw 79 snaps from Amon-Ra St. Brown. We saw 78 snaps from Jameson Williams, but we only saw 75 snaps from Sam LaPorta. He had 48 routes run, so 53 and 53 for both J-Mo and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Only 48 for Sam LaPorta, and only had 2 targets. That is not a great opportunity. And I think when we start to look, it seems like this Jameson Williams emergence has really hurt Sam LaPorta's overall value. It's looking like Sam LaPorta is the 3 in this offense. Now, when we were debating Sam LaPorta versus Travis Kelce as the tight end 1, I still feel good about the youth of a guy like Sam LaPorta. I just know that it hasn't been the hottest start that we would like from Sam LaPorta. So we got to just have to keep our nose to the grindstone here with Sam LaPorta. We don't need to overreact. I think we saw last week, a lot of people were calling for Marvin Harrison Jr.'s head. We saw that amazing performance in week 2. And so a lot of people are breathing a sigh of relief. Even people like me who were like, what the heck's happening with all my Mark Andrews shares, breathing a sigh of relief. I don't think we've gotten that sigh of relief yet for Sam LaPorta, but if there's a person in your league absolutely crying about it, willing to get out for a cheaper cost, 100% let me go try to buy some Sam LaPorta. Now, I wanted to hit on one more tight end, and then we'll bring up one final player that I am looking to buy. It's going to be Brock Bowers. He's on a track right now of absolute vengeance. You could debate that Brock Bowers should have been ranked closer to like a George Kittle than when we were drafting him tight end 9. Definitely put out feelers for Brock Bowers. I know whoever has him is probably super electric. Even if you could pair a guy like an Evan Ingram or George Kittle to go get a guy like Brock Bowers, that's something that I'm looking to currently do. And my final player that you need to be buying right now, it's going to be Jayden Reed for the Green Bay Packers. We saw the amazing week 1 performance, but then of course with Malik Willis starting in week 2, only had 6 fantasy points in week 2, even though 2 targets, 2 receptions for 9 yards. It wasn't great, but we do have Jordan Love coming back in a week or 2. So I do think the burst that we saw with Jordan Love and how explosive this offense could be, I want a piece of that. And I think Jayden Reed's overall cost, it went soaring high, and now it's probably crashing back, even probably past pre-draft levels. And so I want some Jayden Reed on my team. I like these explosive level wide receivers. We see what Rashid Rice has been able to do through his first 2 weeks as a second-year wide receiver. I'm excited for Jayden Reed. Think you need to be targeting some Jayden Reed in your draft. So if you like fantasy football, if you like trying to improve, I'm answering every start-sit question down below all season. I am trying to help you win a fantasy football championship. We are doing start-sit streams every stinking week. Once you're here in the community we're building, best fantasy football community from the ground up. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Check out these 2 videos if you haven't, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.